Well, you heard it on the ATN podcast. Let's see it here. The last seconds of the UMHB Hardin-Simmons game.
And UMHB is going to race the field goal unit out there. 9 seconds and counting, and they're going to have to hurry and line up. This is going to be a 42-yard attempt to win the game by Anthony Avila. And they just get it away. The kick is up. And good! Mary Hardin-Baylor wins it at the buzzer. A 42-yard field goal, and the crew has stopped Hardin-Simmons. 15-14 is the final. Hardin-Simmons coaches storm the field wanting a delay of game, and they're not going to get it. The officials have signaled good. UMHB right now, a game-winning 42-yard field goal.
Okay, so there's a lot to take apart in that, and we're going to spend our open doing it here. Basically, first things first, we're going to freeze frame. Now, the clock on the screen is not the official clock. Video cameras and the computers that sync up these clocks are not always in sync, and so we can't tell for sure if this thing is off at 0 or before 0. But let's face it, JB, there are multiple people concentrating on the clock and the snap, and I'm pretty confident that one of them would have actually noticed if the ball didn't get up in time, including the center, who probably was watching the clock as much as anybody to make sure he had gotten the ball snapped back to the holder, Luke Porman, at that point in time. So there goes that philosophy, that theory. The other one is, they didn't give him enough time to substitute. But as was shown by some folks, here's the rule, or actually the interpretation from the NCAA rulebook, which basically states almost the exact circumstance. Late in the first half, in this case was the second half, Team A is out of timeouts. A pass play on third down ends in bounds. The 25 short of the line of game with the clock showing 10 seconds. I think it was the 25 here, wasn't it, that they had gotten to in the last play? Facing fourth down and 3 or whatever it is, Team A immediately hurries in a field goal team onto the field. And the ruling is Team B should reasonably expect that Team A will attempt a field goal in this situation and should have its field goal defense unit ready. The umpire will not stand over the ball despite them standing over it for 7 seconds, as there should be no issue of the defense being uncertain about the next play. In other words, of course it's going to be a field goal at that point. What do they think was going to happen? While everybody's changing in and out as they're going down the field and 7 seconds expire.
Punt, drop kick.
Yeah, seriously, I really don't get what the Hardin-Simmons fans are trying to attach to. Look, Hardin-Simmons, you did a great job in that game to make it a close game. You should have won it by all rights. I get it. But by all rights and by all reality, Mary Hardin-Baylor won the football game 15-14. There is no do-over here. There's no rule that was broken. The referees got away from the ball, which gave them the safe harbor of UMHB to snap the ball because there was no further substitution going on. Everything was fine. And Avila's kick, holy cow, that was a great booming kick by him.
It would have been good from 55, man. He really decked it. And shout out to Luke Porman with the hold. That's, it's a whole unit. This from the snapper to the holder to the kicker. They executed, and as Coach Fred said in the post-game interview, it's something that they practice all the time. And every football team, I think, at every level practices all the time. So
I'm
no
sure
surprises.
I'm sure that he included "atta baby" when he said something to that effect, because that is his favorite quote. But okay, before we go into our real open, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, the opening credits, tell me what you think about UMHB after this game now.
Well, they certainly seem more vulnerable than they have in prior years, and I think that's probably why most top 25 voters brought them back down to number 2, and Mount Union's your new number 1. But it's worked out pretty good for the crew when they've been number 2 in the past. They've won national championships in those years. So at the end of the day, they're still undefeated. They're still going to be a top seed in the tournament, assuming that they can get through the rest of their schedule unscathed. That Texas Lutheran game looks a little more interesting now, considering the fact that they beat Hardin-Simmons. So, yeah.
Syllogism. Yep. Yeah, one loss for
you love syllogism.
Yep, there it is. Doesn't really work well in football, but we got a lot to talk about in this show, and so let's start week 8, my goodness, of In the Huddle. Okay, let's go back to the East region now after opening our show with the South region, effectively. But a game that affects the East region because Pool C bid could have gone to Hardin-Simmons or to Mary Hardin-Baylor, actually, if they had lost the game, Mary Hardin-Baylor, because Hardin-Simmons would have taken the lead in the ASC and Mary Hardin-Baylor would have been a prime Pool C candidate. Now, it looks like only one team will come out of the ASC unless Texas Lutheran can do what Hardin-Simmons could not. We'll see what happens down the line. We got a lot of teams in the East, though, looking at possible Pool C and Pool A bids still. Nothing is for certain. Nobody has clinched, although we have teams ready or on the verge of doing it this coming Saturday. How we got there is first what we talk about here in crunch time coming up in a moment. But, JB, we call it down here blowout city, but not across the board. There were some good games, but boy, there are some scores that are just getting wider and wider as the season chugs along. What are you thinking?
Well, I think we're seeing the true contenders start to present themselves, and there's some teams out there that might even be better than we realized. But like you said, no bids have been clinched just yet, but we're starting to get a pretty good sense. There are going to be some great matchups in Week 9 that could potentially decide those conference races. So yeah, we're in the final 3 weeks of the season here. It's getting down to brass tacks.
Before we run out cliches, let's go to crunch time for Week 8 of the 2019 season. And this week in crunch time, we're going to start again with the CCC, back to New England here. And we're going to start with the game between a very upstart Western New England team against Curry. But Curry in this game only trailed by 1 point at halftime. It took a touchdown from Alec Coleman to Adam Raza, a 5-yarder here, as you're seeing, to make it 28-20. And that started a streak of 28 straight points for Western New England. They won it 49-27. And had 559 total yards as Coleman passed for 384. Also in the CCC, we had Nichols 51, University of New England 48 in triple overtime. Touchdown from Josh Pierre-Charles. So we finally get his name right. I want to make sure we got that right here. And that touchdown made it 51-48 after University of New England had kicked a field goal in their half of triple overtime. So that was a walk-off by Nichols. Endicott 41, Husson 16, as Endicott scored 31 unanswered. Endicott's been having to play from behind at certain points in games and responded, but we'll see how that works as the games mount up on their schedule. We got a big one coming up for them we'll talk about later. But, Endicott's offense with 54 plays in less than 21 minutes of possession time, that's an odd situation because the defense had to force 4 interceptions in that game. And finally, Salve Regina 45, Becker 0. Joey Moriello at 202 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. That's a lot of touchdowns for a running back. Pick your favorites there.
Well, I think the most interesting score is probably the Western New England Curry one because they struggled a little bit, but now we're starting to see some vintage Alec Coleman. That matchup with Endicott is probably the de facto conference title game here. Shout out to Joey Moriello, though. He's the 5th-ranked rusher in Division III right now. I know Salve's not having the best season, but this guy has been cranking out 200-yard rushing games, multiple touchdown games all season long. So, got to give him some credit there. But yeah, right now it's all about Endicott and Western New England.
In the ECFC, SUNY Maritime 13, Anna Maria 10 in overtime. And we had a Joseph Gagliardi 37-yard field goal to force overtime with 17 seconds left. And then he had another one at basically the end of the overtime session to win the game for SUNY Maritime from 29 yards out. Joseph Gagliardi with that 13-10 win. 7 points of those 13 were his responsibility for SUNY Maritime. Also, Castleton could not hold on to a late lead. Alfred State wins it 21-15. You're seeing the touchdown with 5:09 left. The 32-yard touchdown, Deshaun Wilson to Shirel Broadwater. And it is 21-15 final after the 2-point conversion made it so. And Dean 56, Gallaudet 35. This guarantees that the winner of the ECFC will have at least 4 losses this season in terms of the Pool A bid, at least, because Dean is ineligible. We've chronicled it here quite a bit. But Dean's offense outgained Gallaudet 485 to 235, 39 plus minutes of time possession for Dean. Tyrell Watts, 20 of 26, 249 passing yards, and 5 touchdowns total in that game. Gallaudet with a setback, but between Gallaudet, SUNY Maritime, and Alfred State, there's still a lot to be said in this conference.
Yeah, and I guess even technically Anna Maria, also 2-1, could try to play spoiler, but yeah, for some unknown reason at the end of that overtime game, Frank, the AmCats kept trying to throw the ball into the left corner of the end zone. They ran it looked like the same play 4 times, and they just weren't able to connect. So instead of just doing some short yardage, maybe runs, or just to try to kick a field goal themselves, they tried to go for the proverbial win, and all it took was another Ghilardi field goal to get the win for the Privateers. So certainly up in the air with the ECFC as usual, but we'll just have to see how it goes this weekend when I think SUNY Maritime takes on Gallaudet.
Let's move on to the NASCAC and Western Connecticut versus Framingham State. We kind of chronicled this game, the kind of weirdness of it, because it felt like the Rams were the favorite going in despite having 2 losses compared to no losses for WestCon. Well, Framingham State took an early lead in this game, and then with WestCon trying to make a comeback, an 88-yard kickoff return by Devon Ford made it 32-14 with 2:14 left in the third quarter. No looking back for Framingham State. At that point, they win at 39-14. Adam Wojcinski, 260 total yards, 5 touchdowns, including 4 in the air. The defense had 6 sacks in the game and 3 interceptions. An all-around great effort by Framingham State. Also, let's take a look at Plymouth State. The last play of the game, Matt Dizzoni was covering here. Here's the call.
4th and 6, long, 3-step drop, gonna look over the middle, scrambles to his right for the end zone, and incomplete. Monafo's pushed out of bounds on the reception. Matt Dizzoni with some great coverage.
Plymouth State holds on in a defensive struggle, 7-3, as all scoring occurred in the first half. We had Nick Lancia and David Hamilton rushing 40 times combined for 188 yards for Plymouth State. And, the rest is history in that game. Surprised at the low-scoring nature of that game to a certain degree, but Plymouth State comes away with it. Then it's Mass Dartmouth back on the winning track, 46-8, as the Corsairs outgained Worcester State 519 to 292. Gaychuk with 331 total yards and 4 total touchdowns for UMass Dartmouth, and Westfield State beats Fitchburg State in a battle of winless. Now Westfield State, a battle to get their first win. Westfield State gets their first win as Fitchburg had one win already, 26-7. I think it's Lisandro Colon had 20 rushes for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. But I think we have to talk about the Framingham State performance. It was impressive.
Yeah, it definitely was. The defense showed up and really, shut down the David James Colonial aerial attack. And, Wojcinski put up kind of the usual numbers that you'd expect from him, but it was really the defense that sort of set the tone in that one. And then the special teams touchdown was kind of the backbreaker. Now the Rams are in the driver's seat, and the one team that's not up on the scoreboard is Bridgewater State, who, with only 1 loss, could play spoiler coming up in a couple weeks. The Bears are resurgent and big rivals of Framingham, so certainly keep an eye on them.
Let's go to the NUMAC next, and more video, of course, because that's what we do here on In the Huddle. It's MIT 22, Coast Guard 16. This is an unfortunate turn of events for Coast Guard, as MIT was forced to punt late in the game, and here's what happened.
High end-over-end kick. Little confusion back there. That ball's out. Oh, my God. Oh, my goodness. I think MIT's got it. MIT's got it.
And then a little bit later, Ashton Robinson, as you'll see here, with the 11-yard touchdown run. You could tell that Coast Guard was just brokenhearted, and it was an easy 11-yard touchdown there, 22-16 in favor of MIT. And, what more can you say? But Coast Guard's had one of those seasons where things just haven't always gelled at the very end of the games, unfortunately for them. Then let's take a look here at Julian Nyland going to Clark Ewan for a 59-yard touchdown and made it 21-0 very early on the way to a very surprising 66-13 win over Merchant Marine. This is WPI's best start in their history at 7-0, 645 total yards, make that 4 touchdowns for Nyland. And let's talk about, Connor Field. I think he had 3 touchdowns along with, I think Sean McGowan having one as well from 80 yards out. So all around on the offense, great effort there. Let's go to Springfield 49, Catholic 21 with 470 rushing yards from Springfield. Chad Shade had 168 total yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. And Norwich 51, Maine Maritime 10. Norwich led 44-3 at the half. Matt Dunn 376 yards, 4 touchdowns passing. But look, right now you can see it with the 0 and 1 loss scenarios. This conference is going to be a fight between WPI, MIT, and Springfield.
Yeah, definitely. And that WPI MIT game is coming up this weekend. So a big conference matchup at stake. I mean, MIT is still the defending champions, and they're trying to keep that trophy on the mantle, so to speak. But WPI, man, wow, 66 points. I think that was a program high for them as well. The 645 total yards against Merchant Marine. Didn't see that one coming, Frank.
Nobody did, honestly. That was impressive and unbelievable at the same time. Let's go to the Empire 8. Cortland, boy, this touchdown, you're about to see Ricky Chenard keeping his head in it and his hands around it. It's an amazing play. Also, we're going to see when we do a head-on view of this play, how Segala basically is behind the line of scrimmage. Remember, you don't need to be fully behind it. You need at least just a part of your body behind the line of scrimmage to not be illegally forward passing in college football. And Vosberg didn't agree necessarily, but again, as we slow down, you'll see the ball is secure in bounds. Great job there. And then let's look at the final play of this game.
Ready to go. He throws toward Blake at the pylon, and it's incomplete. There is a flag on the field, however. Holding on the Cardinals. The touchdown wouldn't have counted anyway had Blake caught it. The game has come to an end. Cortland just barely hangs on to hold off Fisher.
So all told, between that touchdown and the great final defensive play as St. John Fisher was down 9 late and almost rallied to win it, it's 42-37 Cortland. Cortland trailed 4 times in the game by as much as those 9 points. Brett Segala, 18 for 32, 409, 4 touchdowns, and a pump block for touchdown again by Cortland's special teams helps with the win. Brockport 41, Utica 14, as Kenny Hernandez had a 42-yard interception return for a touchdown with about 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. That kind of turned back an attempt by Utica to come back in the game. Final score 41-14. And Alfred 34, Hartwick 7, Aaron Griffin with 18 rushes, 118 yards, 2 touchdowns. And the Alfred defense held Hartwick to 79 rushing yards, a sack of 2 INTs. Back to Brockport for a second, though. -2 rushing yards once again. How in the world is it that this team started out so slow but is back to last year's form, at least on rush defense?
Yeah, it was one of those games where everything just went awry, and they just got in the hole and never really got out of it. So Brockport is, you got to give that coaching staff a lot of credit. They have righted the ship. They found some new players to contribute. And so, yeah, I mean, right now, Brockport, Cortland on a collision course for the Empire 8 championship this weekend, it looks like.
No video in the Liberty League, but we'll talk about the game still. Ithaca 59, Rochester 0 as Ithaca outgained Rochester 557-207. Joe Germanario goes 22 for 27, 5 touchdowns, 332 yards, only 1 interception in the game. Number 25, Union, on the collision course with Ithaca, wins against Buffalo State 28-14. A little bit of a pedestrian performance by Union in that game, though. Will Bellamy did have 264 yards and 4 touchdowns in the game. And you're giving a little bit of a shout-out in your stat lines here to offensive lineman Kyle Schrader, who recovered the fumble for Buffalo State, scored a touchdown. It's a Heisman Trophy candidate, I'm sure, right there. 5 sacks for the Union defense. St. Lawrence had a hold on as RPI tried to surge back after going down pretty big early. St. Lawrence becoming a first half team of sorts as well with that passing game. They led 28-0 at the half. They held down for a 35-21 win. Tyler Groshot's 30 for 47 performance, 357 to 5 touchdowns. A big deal in that situation. So that is the Liberty League, but again, it is the championship game. Stated incorrectly on Twitter this week, deleted the tweet because it actually is in fact the championship game coming up between Ithaca Union. We'll talk more about that later, but what did you think of the action?
You know, I think I was most impressed by the fact that, you know, St. Lawrence just came out and took it to RPI so strongly. I mean, the Saints have been a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde team this season, but if you look on the stat lines, Groshot's numbers are very close, if not almost identical, to Joe Germanario's in every area except for maybe interceptions. Joe has only thrown 3, whereas Tyler's thrown 9, but otherwise, their yardage, the completion percentage, touchdowns, and all that is pretty much the same. So Hobart, who's going to be hosting the Saints this weekend, is they're in for a fight.
Well, let's go to the MAC, where it was the home of the starting kickoff return for touchdown, basically, today. First, Delaware Valley. Here's Jameer Pavard's 98-yard kickoff return, and he goes to the house with it to start the game. Del Val never looked back, 51-3 over Lebanon Valley. That breaks the consecutive winning streak in MAC games by Delaware Valley. It's 26 straight now for them, and they outgained Lebanon Valley 452-100. Now we got a few clips here from the Wilkes Misericordia overtime game. First, here's another kickoff return. It is this time Nate Whitaker, and he goes to the house. But look, we had to go overtime, and Misericordia scores first, gets a touchdown. Look what happens. Missed extra point. Key play in the game. As on the Wilkes side of overtime, here's a 16-yard touchdown from, who is that? Nate Whitaker, the same kickoff return touchdown guy from earlier. And he got that from Doug Weist, who was in for Jose Tabora, who was ejected from this game for 2 personal fouls earlier in the game. We'll talk more about that later. But it is 36-35 Wilkes in overtime, staying alive in a very, very small chance for a Pool C bid. And Lycoming 42, FDU Florham 21, Elijah Shemery with 417 total yards, 4 passing and 2 rushing touchdowns, 6 touchdowns for him. Widener 59, Albright 34, as their offense had 619 total yards. And Sean McGahee with 453 passing yards and 7 passing touchdowns for Widener. Stevenson 39, Kings 15. Stevenson had 17 unanswered in the third quarter and about 270-yard advantage on offense. 3 touchdowns for Ryan Sedgwick, the Stevenson quarterback. But boy, the highs and lows of that Wilkes Misericordia game. It seems like every Misericordia game has these highs and lows.
Well, Frank, I got a special message from you from Coach Drock. He wrote me on Saturday at around 7:45. Tell Frank, thanks for the bulletin board material, LOL.
Okay, yeah, I believe you. And Coach Isernia has practiced that one on me over the last 2 years. So no problem, Coach. Love you, Drock.
Yeah, you got to give them credit, though. I mean, the Wilkes was down, their number 1 wide receiver, their starting left tackle, both their number 1 and number 2 quarterbacks after Tabora got ejected for a little huffing and puffing, apparently. Second personal, not exactly the ideal situation we want to see, but third string quarterback leads the team to a win in overtime. Let's talk about the next man up, and that's a pretty impressive job by the Colonels there.
We say blowout city, but not across the board. Another overtime game we're going to lead with here in the NJAC coming up. That is Wesley 20, Montclair State 17. And you're going to see the touchdown from Ruhann Peele It's a 1-yard run, but let's recognize he's a wide receiver, and they basically blocked for him to, with his speed, just blast through the hole with the speed, and it worked. 20-17. More from him later after we talked about Wesley overcoming 3 interceptions, including a pick 6. They scored with 38 seconds remaining, had a huge 4th, and I think it was 17 they had to convert on that drive. They went 2 for 2 on 4th down conversions on the final drive to tie it, and then you saw the win right there after Montclair State had a field goal in their end of overtime. Then let's take a look at the back-to-back chicanery in the William Patterson game. It was 7-0. At halftime, William Patterson, Rowan scores, and here's Elijah Rem with the 30-yard touchdown run. A great fake, and he gets it to the house for a 14-7 lead. Then Gerard Hayes, very wide awake in the backfield. Well, the backfield, or we call it the receiving zone of the kickoff, the ensuing kickoff. A 6-yard scoop and score off that kickoff for a 21-7 lead. So in a matter of seconds, it went from 7-7 to 21-7 in favor of Rowan. Final score, 21-14 Rowan. They scored 21 unanswered in that third quarter, including the 2 you saw right there. Mike Mascioli with 14 tackles in the game. Also, Salisbury 65, Kane 16, the number 10 team in the nation, outgained Kane 409 to 254, yet they won by 49 points. Go figure that one out. And Christopher Newport 17, TCNJ 6. TCNJ's offense has got to show up here because your defense is doing a reasonably good job across the board, but they're not putting up the points. As Jack Henderson for CNU went 20 for 21, 186 yards, 1 touchdown. That's an efficient day if I've ever heard of one.
Yeah, and apparently he must be healthy because we had seen in prior weeks that they had a different quarterback plan. So maybe that's been part of the captain's struggles this season is trying to keep their team healthy. But good win against a tough Lions team. Christopher Newport 2-2 in the NJAC. I mean they're fighting to get back to 500 before the season's over.
Let's end in the NESCAC. And here is the field goal that won the game in double overtime as both kickers missed kicks in the first overtime. That is Mason Von Ness. Love the name. 20-yard game-winning field goal for Wesleyan. It's 31-28 over Amherst in that game. And they moved to 6-1. But again, they're really not looking good in the chances for the win of the conference because Middlebury continues to win. They won 47-29. That's the 100th win for Coach Ritter. And Will Jernigan with 203 total yards and 4 touchdowns he accounted for. Williams 29, Trinity 15. There's significance to this game beyond the fact Williams moving to 6-1, and that is that there is a 20 home game winning streak broken for Trinity in this game. So this season has really come crashing apart for Trinity, moving to 4-3 in the season, 6 sacks for the defense of Williams. Colby gets their first win of the season in the CBB Game 1 as it's 23-20 Colby. They led 23-6 at the half, but had to hold off Bates, who couldn't make it on a 4th down play from the 38. And Hamilton, 36, Tufts 21. It is Hamilton's 4th win of the season. They're really having a great season. We talked about last week. And their defense had 3 interceptions, 3 sacks, and 1 fumble recovery. But it's Middlebury's conference right now. Yep,
really is. And congrats to Coach Ritter on the 100th win. All you need, I think, at this point, Frank, is probably one more to officially wrap it up. So great season for the Panthers. Williams, you got to give him credit for playing spoiler to the Trinity homecoming crowd. And Wesleyan for gutting out. And it's not too often you see Amherst with 3 losses either. So both them and Trinity having tough seasons.
And hey, guess what, JB? That's crunch time for Week 8. And after crunch time, of course, we have our new exciting segment, JB Stat Chat.
All right, here we go. Notable offensive days. We had, as we saw, WPI setting a scoring record with 66 points. Salisbury with one point less than that with a 65 against Kane. Widener goes 59 points, and happy 21st birthday to Widener quarterback Sean McGahee. 7 touchdowns. He's the number 1 rated passing, or at least has the most passing yards in Division III right now. So a double whammy for him. setting single game records for his school. And as I mentioned before, Joey Moriello with another 200-yard, 5-touchdown game. Dean quarterback Terrell Watts getting the job done with 5 touchdowns. Lycoming set a record, and I don't know if it was this one, Frank, but there might have been a change to the box score with some of the yardage amounts, but still over 600 total yards for the Warriors. And lots of quarterbacks having big days in the Liberty League. We talked about Matt Dunn with his almost 400 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. Chemery from Lycoming over 400 yards passing, I believe, 6 touchdowns there. So yeah, it was a lot of offense. That's why we were saying, kind of blowout city. Although there were a couple of close games, that was a big reason for it. On the defensive side of the ball,
hold on, JB. I think you need to take a drink because that was a lot of offensive performances you had to just go through right there. I'll take your defensive ones and give you a second to breathe here. I'm a good guy like that. Ithaca, their second consecutive shutout. Framingham State had those 6 sacks and 10 tackles for loss. Wilkes had 6 sacks, 13 tackles for loss total. That's incredible. 1 interception. Gallaudet's Mason Gooch had 15 tackles, a sack, and 2 for loss as well, and a forced fumble. That's a lot of stat line. St. Lawrence and RPI combined for 10 sacks and 17 tackles for loss. So combined effort there, despite a 35-21 score in that game. So the D's were tenacious, but a lot more O's than D's when you look at the combined look of these things. But then you go back to the special teamers. Have you recovered? Can you do this? Can you give us all these special teamers?
Yeah, there was a lot of special teamers this weekend, Frank. So let's see if we can rattle them off quickly. So Jameer Pavard from Del Val, 98 kickoff return for a touchdown. You had Wilkes wide receiver Nate Whitaker, as you mentioned in crunch time, with a 93-yard kickoff return for a touchdown to open the game. They needed that touchdown to win it in the end because they only won by 1 point in overtime. Nick D. Cariano from Endicott still booting 40-plus yard field goals. He was also 5 for 5 on PATs, had a 62.1 yard average on his kickoffs. I mean, can someone call the NFL and tell him to take a look at this kid? Because, boy, there's impressive stats there. Joseph Gagliardi from SUNY Maritime, we mentioned game-winning field goal for them to keep them in the ECFC hunt. And then once again,
not just the game winner there, but also the one that tied it before OT as well. So he was 2 for 2 late.
He stayed twice for the Privateers. And then once again, this is like the 3rd or 4th week in a row, Frank, that Cortland has scored some kind of special teams touchdown. We talked about it with Brett Sagala in our player interview from last week. And it's really true. I mean, this special teams unit is helping Cortland win games and keeping them unbeaten. They're now up to 18th in the country. So, yeah, Dylan Dubuque returned, blocked a punt. It was returned by Mark Dalsey for the touchdown. It was a key point in the game, too, Frank, because Cortland was down by 9 points. This punt block and touchdown all of a sudden just put them behind 2, really had a huge momentum swing and helped the Dragons prevail in that one. Framingham State's Devon Ford, 88-yard kickoff return. And then, MIT's Jake Benoit with that, forced fumble on the punt return. Because at that point, it looked like MIT's day was done because all that Ryan Murphy and company had to do Ryan Jones had to do was just kneel down and to get the win. But they forced a turnover, and MIT is still alive in the new MAC title race.
So we had to go back and make a correction here. I'm just noticing as we're talking about something that it looks like, according to their box score, that Nichols University of New England game did go to 4 overtimes, not 3 overtimes actually. And so there's only one way to confirm this. To go to the actual official site's information here and see how many overtimes were there. 4 overtimes, JB. So actually, I take it back, guys, and we'll make sure the notes reflect this. But you guys did match Nichols with the win in it. The current 2019 record for Division III games, the third East Region game to go to a quadruple overtime session is Nichols versus University of New England. So sorry about that, University of New England. Thanks for your good video, by the way. They have quality video for a new program, but Nichols got that win. Let's go back also for a second. Wesley and their win. That was a heck of a comeback. It looked like Montclair State had them. That would have actually met my upset call for the week. It did not quite materialize. But let's talk here. Ruhann Peele, he had both that big fourth down conversion we were talking about and the game-winning touchdown from 1 yard out. He talked with Sean Green from WDEL after the game.
With Ruhann Peele after a crazy overtime victory for Wesley, take me through that last play.
Coach called the play. We said a few things to each other. We knew the game was on the line. I liked the play call. We all did. I felt like we was going to get in there. And the O-line dominated, did their job, and squeezed through there and got in there and celebrate with my teammates.
The 4th and 15 play, the timeout is called. You guys had plenty of time to think about it. When you're coming back to that football and you're right down at the first down mark, did you know you had that first down?
I believe I had it. When I caught it, I felt like I was at the yard line that I needed to be. He pushed me forward, so I thought they was going to give us a forward progress, and they did, and I'm happy it turned out to be our way, and we got that call.
How tough was this for this Wesley offense against a really good Montclair State defense?
Montclair was very physical. I believe the most physical team we played this year, but I also feel like it was more mistakes on our end than their part. I had a lot of drops personally. We had a few overthrown balls, and we just wasn't executing it. It's hard to win that way, and we stuck together and we fought and we executed when we needed to and came out with the victory.
What did this offense learn about itself on that last drive of regulation?
We learned that if we stick together, keep our heads on, keep that brotherhood, get tight, and act like we're a family and give it all on the line, that we could come up, we can compete with anybody, and if the game's on the line, we can win together if we stick together.
It's now 2 overtime victories and the kick at the end to Endicott and a 1-point game against Rowan. These were games you guys were losing last year. What's the difference between this squad and the squad from last year?
Honestly, I think we are bought into more what the coaches are saying, and I also think the team bonding is closer. I think guys are, more passionate and locked in about things, and I just think it's throughout the week we're focused on being 1-0. We're looking at the big picture, and we know games like this where we're going to overtime and winning by field goals, it just makes us stronger for deep playoffs, late football games, and it's going to help us win.
On that last play of regulation, how long did that ball feel like it was floating to Ricky Hess from your angle?
Oh, man, I was right by him, and I'm like, oh, man. And I see him hit a burst of energy, and he got it and got in there. I was so happy. I had a bad game, I felt like, but I feel like that's what your brothers and teammates are for, to pick you up when you're down and, just execute when we need to execute.
Thanks to Sean from WDEL, our good friend there, and Jason Bowen, always a great friend of ours as well. He works with on the broadcasts. But Sean, with that interview that he posted to Twitter, and great helps. And I wish I'd gone down there for that game. It was impossible time-wise, but I was considering it. I had it circled in my calendar for a while. Then I realized it's at Wesley, and it would have been tough to go to versus if it was at Montclair State. Either way, great game. Watched a lot of it, and then the video crapped out on the whole thing, and so we had to go to the audio for a little bit. Sean, you sounded good on the audio. Granted, your audio on video, but when I only had to rely on your voice, you did a great job. So, okay, JB, let's talk about the conference races at this point. Who can win it outright next week? Who can't? But first,
well, funny, we have a question from the warden of the NJAC, Wolverines fandom, one of our big fans out there. We appreciate them following the show, and he asked, well, playoffs are on the horizon. Conferences are just about set, and the at-large bids are in contention. How's everything shaping up in your purview? Any locks, surprises, long shots? Seems kind of appropriate question. Hey, there you go.
Put Rossi in as quarterback, and you're fine, basically.
Exactly.
So, okay, what was the ultimate question one more time for me?
The ultimate question was kind of with the playoffs on the horizon, conferences are just about set, at-large bids are in contention. How's everything shaping up in your purview? Any locks, surprises, or long shots that we see kind of on the immediate horizon?
Why don't we go through the standings, and we'll basically point it out. How's that sound, at least from the East region's point of view? I think it's the way to handle it. So let's look at the locks or the big games coming up this week, and what's squaring away itself. Endicott, Western New England. Hey, they play this week. 6-1, 6-1, 4-0, 4-0 in the conference. But, the weirdness of it all is that Nichols is still technically a voice in this situation because they face Endicott. So, in some ways, let's follow the logic together here. If Western New England beats Endicott in this game, then Western New England would have to win 1 out of 2 of their remaining games to win the conference. Whereas if Endicott wins the game, then if Nichols remains with one loss to the end of the season, that Nichols game could decide it ultimately, or we could have a three-way tiebreaker scenario as well. So there is an interesting scenario brewing here because Nichols has not lost 2 games. That University of New England quadruple overtime win is important because it does not give us clarity in this conference based on this game alone. So that's something to look at as things develop. Is this a Pool C conference? No, it is not a Pool C conference, I don't believe. Western New England would have to climb probably over 2 teams to get there. The East will not get 3 Pool C bids in my estimation. They'll be lucky to get 2. They could, but the likelihood is 1 currently Pool C bid. We'll see what happens if a couple of things shake out. So there's the CCC. Anything you want to point out?
Nope. I think you covered it.
Okay. Well, now the ECFC. I will go on a major limb here on the ECFC to say this is indeed not a Pool C bid conference. I know it hurts me to say this, but
sure about that, Frank? Really?
I'm gonna take that leap here and say that SUNY Maritime, Gallaudet, while they're both one-loss teams, we have 3 weeks 3 weeks left in the season, but only really 2 weeks of conference games left. This is the oddity in their schedule because the only game on November 16th is SUNY Maritime playing Mount St. Joseph, which is a non-conference game. So this coming week, Gallaudet, SUNY Maritime, as you pointed out earlier. Dean, Alfred State is important because Alfred State still poses a minor threat in this situation as they still face SUNY Maritime. So SUNY Maritime wins and Alfred State wins on Saturday. Then really things get a little interesting in that SUNY Maritime Alfred State game on the 9th at Alfred State. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in this conference still. What could go really wrong is if all hell breaks loose somehow. Anna Maria has a voice in this thing still because I believe they play Gallaudet in the final week of the season, November 9th, final week of conference play of the season for them. So technically they are still in, as you said, for a Pool A bid. Dean, though, right now, if they win this week, would be in a virtual lock position for the conference title, whatever that means. There's that figure. There we go. Conference title. But not the Pool A bid. And we've kind of chronicled that whole situation. We're not going to bore you with it. So there's a lot to go here to talk in the ECFC. How about the MASCAC? Are we a Pool C bid conference here? No. No situations where, well, look, Westcon, if they win out, would be 9-1, but would not win the conference title. Framingham State wins out as well. So, there's a possibility for a one-loss team not to win the conference, which is one of the major qualifiers for Pool C. But Western Connecticut doesn't have the resume to qualify, is what most people would say to you. Greg Thomas, Wally Wabash, as we call him, would confirm that, I believe, as much as anybody. So you have Framingham State at 5-2, Western Connecticut 6-1, but the conference records are 5-0 for Framingham State, and Western Connecticut 4-1. You pointed out Bridgewater State earlier, and Bridgewater State has a game coming up against Framingham State in Week 10 that could be essentially whether or not we square away the conference title on November 9th, Week 10. So that's one to keep your eye on. First, though, this weekend, Plymouth State, Bridgewater State is actually a big game. Framingham State, Mass Maritime at Mass Maritime. You know what? Mass Maritime, despite a recent slip-up, is still a team that's trying to prove themselves here. And their win-loss record at 5-2, 3-2 in the conference, shows that they're a better team than we've expected. So, you know what? Framingham State can't look past them.
No.
I left you speechless. It's amazing sometimes. Amazing. So then let's go to the NUMAC. WPI at 7-0. Now, WPI dropped the game. I believe they have to still play Springfield. They have played Springfield already, correct? So it's MIT. Springfield's remaining schedule is Maine Maritime and MIT. WPI has to play MIT as well. So MIT has some control here over their destiny. In fact, they do control their own destiny, does MIT at 4-2, 3-1. They play WPI in Springfield. If MIT were to win out, or if WPI were to win out, they control their own destiny to win the conference. Springfield needs help. They need MIT to beat WPI and then some other things to go haywire pretty much in situations. But MIT has already beaten Springfield, and WPI has beaten, or actually, no, wait a minute though. No, MIT plays Springfield, excuse me. So take that back, only partially. MIT Springfield could be an important game in week 11, but the conference could be solved as early as November 9th, depending on some things shaking out, if WPI basically can be perfect to that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and what I'm starting to hear a common theme across the board here, Franco, especially with these New England conferences, is that even though there are bigger matchups in week 9, the conference title still won't be decided until week 10 or 11 because of certain other teams hanging around on the periphery. So maybe week 10 is turning out to be more of a championship Saturday than I realize, just based on the fact that we won't really have any resolution this weekend. We might, see teams that are putting themselves in position to clinch this Saturday. But actually, just given the way things have shaken out with this sort of topsy-turvy season, it's really going to come down to weeks 10 and 11, just like every other year.
Well, here's a conference that could be solved after this weekend, though, and that is the Empire 8. If Cortland beats Brockport, then Cortland wins the conference because they've beaten both Brockport and Alfred at that point. So Cortland wins, they will be the playoff headed team for the conference, and that would also mean that most likely Brockport and Alfred are not going to be Pool C eligible teams with 2 losses. There are too many good one-loss teams in the country that are going to be looking for Pool C bids. So if Cortland wins, give Cortland the bid. If Brockport wins, then Pool C becomes a distinct possibility for Cortland if they can win out after that loss. A 9-1 Cortland team looking for a ticket from Pool C would be a very strong contender for Pool C.
Yeah, especially if they're able to topple a potentially 9-0 top 10 ranked Ithaca team. Although Union's going to have a lot to say on whether or not that comes to pass, so we'll see.
Well, let's look at the other games real quick. Utica at Alfred and Morrisville State at Hartwick earlier in the day. Brockport at Cortland, 2 p.m. If you think I should go to that game, folks, you should be voting for it in the last hours of our poll. We have over 350, maybe even close to 400 votes.
Earlier, it was close to 400. It was like 379, like an hour ago.
And this is on Tuesday afternoon, so Lord only knows where it is right now. But our most successful poll ever, and I guess the schools are really behind this, although the state schools were getting walloped as of the recording of this episode here. It was like 75-25 Union Ithaca winning that versus. Yeah, so there you go. Let's go to the Liberty League since we kind of just began that discussion a little bit. And here's the conference championship game. If Union wins, they win it. If Ithaca wins, they win it. As there are no one-loss teams remaining below them, and both teams have one non-conference game to go. Union will play Utica in week 10, and Ithaca will play Cortland in week 11. So this will decide it. Week 9 will decide the Liberty League. Don't remember that happening too often, to be honest with you. It's 4-0 versus 4-0, 7-0 versus 7-0 in Ithaca. I'm probably going to be heading out to that game and broadcasting from there a little bit with you on this Saturday in some way, shape, or form or another. What are you thinking? Give us an early analysis of this one.
I think it's going to come down to whether or not IK Erebor can rush for over 100 yards. If Union can balance the passing attack with a strong rushing game that keeps Joe Germinario on the sidelines, then the Dutchmen have a chance to pull off the upset.
And the other part of this is Pool C. If Ithaca loses this game and remains 9-1, for the same reason you brought up about Cortland, an Ithaca team that essentially is 9-1 with a win versus Cortland ultimately, would be a very strong Pool C candidate. Union, on the other hand, has a schedule issue right now. Their strength of schedule is not going to get high enough to really merit them much. They're going to need some teams to start appearing in the regional rankings, so they have regionally ranked opponents that they've beaten, like Hobart, to justify. Because when the teams that you played are Anna Maria and Westfield State and Utica, that's a problem right now. Utica coming up in week 10. Springfield, though, still possibly could be a ranked team, and that could actually help Union ultimately. So Ithaca is the more likely of the two to be a Pool C eligible team, but Union would not be fully out of it if they were the team that needed the Pool C bid ultimately. The undercard for the Liberty League, briefly, St. Lawrence at Hobart and Buffalo State at RPI. That St. Lawrence-Hobart game is important for Union especially, I would say, but Ithaca too. They have both beaten Hobart this season. And so if Hobart appears as a regionally ranked team with their 2 losses, then it is possible that it buoys Union or Ithaca, whoever loses this game, for Pool C purposes. So keep your eye on that score at noon on Saturday. Okay, we've covered New York. Let's go to the MAC at this point. Yeah, that's 6 of the 9 conferences. And Del Val at 6-0, but we have 3 teams sitting at 4-1, waiting and hoping for Del Val to slip. And Del Val's next game is against Alvernia. I'm doubting that they're going to slip in that game. The possibilities for a slip, though, by Del Val, they don't play in week 10, would have to be in week 11 against Widener. And if they were to lose against Widener, we'd have to look at the different tiebreak scenarios and whatnot. Let's see. Technically, I guess the question is, has Del Val played Wilkes and Stevenson, or can Misericordia even do anything with them because of...
Del Val beat Wilkes 2 weeks ago, and now Wilkes took care of Misericordia. So the Cougars have a loss now. So I the only situation I could see playing out, Frank, that would stop Del Val is somehow they lost to Widener in week 11.
I'm going to go out on the limb here and say, based on what we know about the tiebreaker scenarios here, let's see, Wilkes, Stevenson, and they won't play Misericordia. I will go out on the limb here and suggest to you that if Delaware Valley beats Alvernia, they've won the MAC.
Yeah.
Because I can't see a tiebreaker that Misericordia would beat them in.
No, not with identical conference records, and the overall record would tip the scales to Del Val. But
Widener would have to be involved in the tiebreaker to make Del Val have a problem. Widener's 3-3 right now, so I don't think that Week 11 game will count in that respect. So the question becomes: is there any Pool C eligible team? Wilkes would be the only one there. If Wilkes goes 9-1. It's a very, very slim chance that they could be in some position for it. How slim, folks? Look, is Wilkes better than an Ithaca team or a Cortland team at 9-1 or a Union team at 9-1 on paper? Probably not. Definitely not better than the Wesley team at 9-1 when it comes down to it. So, or at 8-1 when you throw out the Franklin Pierce game. So, Wilkes, you've got a chance. Don't go to Vegas on it, please. I guess you don't even have to go to Vegas anymore because all states allow betting now. But don't bet either. That's please don't bet. But you get my point. The odds are bad.
My guess is Wilkes ends up hosting a MAC CCC bowl game, but
a MAC CC game, you mean? Yeah. You added too many C's.
Yeah. Centennial Conference. Although there are 2 seasons.
Yeah, you went CCC. Unfortunately. Here on Wheel of Fortune, we've been looking for too much money. NJAC, Salisbury, Wesley. Okay, Salisbury basically has 3 games left. They win 2 of them, they win. Or if Wesley drops 1, I think they win as well. But let's just look at it this way. They could clinch on week 10, most likely. Yeah. Salisbury. That would be against TCNJ.
Here's something I wanted to kind of run by you, Frank. I went. This is scary because I actually was going back through some old data information, and so because right now in the top 5, we basically have all teams that are either in the West or the North and South regions, basically everywhere except for the East, right? So what I'm having are flashbacks to 2012 when the 2 top-rated teams in the East region were a 8-1 Wesley, and the one loss that Wesley had that season, I think, was to an FCS school. So basically, a undefeated Wesley team who was ranked as high as 6th, and you had a 10-0 Hobart team which was ranked as high as 7th. And the way the brackets broke down that particular year was that you had out in the sort of the west side of things, you had Oshkosh and Linfield, where Linfield was in the top, was like number 3 or something like that. In the sort of the other side of that bracket, you had the Tommies as the number 1 and Hobart as the number 2. The other side, you had Wesley paired with UMHB, and you had Mount Union 9-0 Widener team on the other side of that bracket. So I could see, and I know we've talked about East Region pods, but it feels like this year we're looking at a situation. Let's say if Ithaca runs the table and they end up as high as, let's say, 6 or 5. And then Salisbury is sitting there at 9-0 with a team with a win over a WIAC team. They'll have some pretty good strength of schedule because of the NJAC. This is a situation playing out to me that feels an awful lot like this 2012 bracket, but who knows?
So you're saying there probably wouldn't be an East-centric bracket, that they would just slide the East pods around to different sectors?
Yes, exactly. It feels like what would happen is that they would take an upstate New York high-ranked champion like an Ithaca, or maybe, let's say, if Cortland runs a table, and they'll move them to the north. They'll have Mount Union paired up in a situation with maybe a Del Val, maybe with some Centennial teams mixed in there, because Muhlenberg is right on the the cusp of the top 5, top 6. I just feel the way things are shaking out to me, Frank, and when I look at the top 25 poll, I just don't see. I mean, maybe if Ithaca runs the table, they can get that potential 1 seed that we've talked about in the prior show. But it feels a lot more like 2012 to me, based on how things. The Johnnies have been playing strong. Whitewater's right up there. Just feels like it's going to be a northwest sort of centered top 4.
I'll tell you, I'm going to debate back with you for a second here. If you look at the totality of where we are in the regions of the north, south, and east, especially for a second, you've got Salisbury, probably a 9-0 team when it gets down to what you're saying. Possibly Cortland or Ithaca as a 10-0 team, or perhaps Union. You could have Union and one of Union and Cortland. It would be the possible twosome there. Delaware Valley is got the loss, so we can't look at the MAC at that point. But Muhlenberg is possibly a 10-0 team waiting to happen. Mary Hardin Baylor, if they can get through Texas Lutheran, looks like a 10-0 team waiting to happen. So when you look at things, would you need to slide Salisbury to the south, build kind of a quasi-southernish type sub-bracket or pod and slide it underneath Mary Hardin Baylor? But the answer is probably not, because Muhlenberg is strong enough to deserve its own consideration out there. So there's a lot of teams that are strong enough. So here's what may end up happening. Very likely, Mount Union will be the 1 seed on top of 1 East pod. And if the East pod gets a chance to be at least its own entity, per se, a 1 seed somewhere, if they give one of these teams a 1 seed, which is not guaranteed, they would probably be on top of a pod that's hosted by Muhlenberg, is my guess right now. But but conventionally, honestly, my what I would do if I'm ignoring all this static, I would put Mary Hardin Baylor on the top and Muhlenberg in the bottom of a quadrant as the 1 and the 2, and I would basically put the East team that's most deserving as a 1, and underneath as a 2. The next East team, Mount Union obviously gets their bracket, and then Whitewater, I guess, or St. John's, I guess, would get one out in the West.
Yeah.
The problem trying to shift all these ones out to the West region, or as many as could be deserved, is geography ultimately. If the NCAA is willing to spring for flights, then this is going to be, the tough part is not going to be picking the Pool C teams for the committee this year. It is going to be essentially, how do you sort the top 8 teams? How do you pick the 8 teams and then sort them? That's going to be a very long, arduous process for them if things don't change and some losses don't start occurring across the country. Because there's a lot of teams right now. We are top heavy in the country in terms of win-loss records. And the strength of schedule numbers and the RRO records don't necessarily help you shake it out right now.
Nope.
So there's kind of that 30,000-foot view, as we always call it here. And Jack, again, with Salisbury, 2 wins would win it out, or a Wesley slip-up would go a long way to give Salisbury the conference. And the NESCAC, I think you made the call last week, and nothing has happened to change that call. If Middlebury wins, I believe, one more game, yes, if they win one more game against Hamilton, they have won the conference, or at least a share of the title, depending on how they do it in the NESCAC. I believe they use head-to-head as a tiebreaker. They'll play Hamilton. No pushover right now, Hamilton, so Middlebury can't sleep on them at 12:30. But right now, Middlebury looks like the king of the hill in the NESCAC. JB, time to go for us. Any final thoughts?
Well, we're going to have some student athlete guests this week. We're working on getting that set up, and we'll probably also have some more picks on Friday. So it's we're getting down to the final weeks of the season. The games on Saturday are going to be on November 2nd. So we're in the home stretch, Frank. We're getting into November. That's when some of the playoff stuff starts to percolate. Our friend Greg Thomas, I believe, is going to have an article on D3Football.com this week where he does some mock projections. I'm sure we'll probably have him on the show at some point in the near future to talk about playoff selections and stuff like that, kind of like we were kicking around here. So it's getting down to the end of the year. So it's some conference races. But yeah, things are a little more up in the air than I thought, Frank. That's what's kind of fun about this. You think you're like, oh yeah, this team's going to win the conference, but then again, well, some things still need to happen for that.
Yep.
Not there yet. So I thought it'd be all figured out by week 9. Guess what? It's not. So it's going to be a couple more weeks.
I was having fun last night debating the East with Greg in terms of the ordering a little bit. We took our guess at it last week. We'll try to do a little readjustment of it this Friday as well, to look at what we think the East rankings would look like, if we stopped the season this week. We'll do that Friday with our prediction show. And as you said, student athletes coming up soon here in the Huddle. Until then, thanks for watching. See you soon, folks.